My daughter-in-law opened the door, looked me in the eye, and said, "What are you doing here? You can't just walk in my own house." I did not argue, I did not raise my voice. I set my bag down and I walked inside. If you've ever been made to feel like a guest in a place you built with your own sacrifice, stay with me. Some lessons come late in life, but when they arrive, they change everything. And if stories about dignity, boundaries, and quiet strength speak to you, then please subscribe to my channel. There are more coming. I had been gone 14 days. 14 quiet days in Vermont, staying with an old colleague recovering from surgery. I left my home locked, neat, and exactly the way I prefer it, orderly, still, dignified. When you live alone at 71, you become intimate with silence. It stops feeling lonely and starts feeling earned. The taxi dropped me off at 3:12 p.m. I remember because I always check the time when I step back onto my own driveway. It is a habit from years of administrative work, documentation, precision, awareness. There was a car in front of my house. White, polished, not mine. I did not panic. Ryan had mentioned he and Vanessa were having some temporary issues with their condo. He used the word temporary twice on the phone. People repeat words when they're trying to convince themselves. Still, no one had asked to use my home. I unlocked the front door. The scent hit me first, vanilla and something synthetic. Vanessa's perfume. My house smells like lemon oil and coffee, always has, even when Thomas was alive. Especially then, the furniture had been shifted, subtly but enough that I noticed immediately. My blue armchair angled toward the television. The framed photograph of Thomas and me at Cape May moved from the mantel to a side table. Decorative pillows that were not mine arranged on my sofa. It was like walking into a version of my life that had been redecorated without my permission. Then I heard her voice. "Oh, you're back." She stood at the hallway entrance, one hand on her hip, wearing cream linen pants and an expression I can only describe as inconvenienced. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Not shocked. Not relieved, just irritated. I looked at her carefully. Years of running a school office taught me something invaluable. People reveal more in posture than in words. "This is my address," I said calmly. She laughed, light, dismissive. "Well, you could have called. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." I told Ryan I'd be home today," she shrugged. "Schedules change." Behind her I saw movement. My hallway rug had been replaced, not moved, replaced. That was when I noticed the door to my bedroom slightly ajar. Not closed, not respectful, just claimed. I walked forward. Vanessa stepped sideways but didn't move out of my path entirely. A territorial gesture. "You can't just walk in like that," she said lightly, as though she were explaining etiquette to a child. "We've been settling in my home," she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Well, Ryan is your son." There it was. The entitlement disguised as logic. Ryan emerged from the kitchen at that moment, holding a mug that used to sit in my cabinet. "The navy one Thomas bought me on our 30th anniversary." "Mom," he said. His tone was soft. Apologetic but not corrective. I looked at him, really looked. 45 years old, still avoiding eye contact when conflict enters the room. "Hello, Ryan," he scratched the back of his neck. "We were going to talk to you." "When?" He hesitated. Vanessa answered for him. "After things settled. We didn't want to stress you while you were away." "Stress me?" I stepped past them and walked down the hallway. My bedroom door opened wider with the slightest push. My sheets had been changed. Not washed, changed. My ivory comforter folded at the end of the bed. Their charcoal gray duvet spread neatly across the mattress, her jewelry on my dresser. His shoes under my window, a new diffuser on my nightstand. I stood there for several seconds, absorbing it all. This was not an emergency stay, this was occupancy. I have spent my entire adult life understanding documentation, permissions, and boundaries. Schools run on policy, families should too. Behind me, Vanessa spoke again. "We assumed you wouldn't mind. It's silly to keep a big house empty." "Silly." Ryan shifted his weight. "It's just temporary, Mom." Temporary is the most dangerous word in the English language. It builds permanent damage quietly. I turned slowly to face them. "You assumed," I repeated. Vanessa crossed her arms. "Well, you weren't using it." That sentence told me everything. To her, ownership meant usage, visibility, activity. If something is quiet, it must be available. But quiet does not mean vacant. I walked back toward the living room. I set my handbag on the console table. I removed my coat. I hung it on the hook that has held my coats for 28 years. Vanessa watched me as if I were disrupting her arrangement. "Evelyn," she said, voice tightening slightly, "we've already moved some of our things in." "I can see that." Ryan stepped forward. "We had a problem with the condo lease. Just paperwork confusion." Paperwork confusion from a sales manager who signs contracts daily. "How long?" I asked. He hesitated again. "A few weeks, maybe a month." Vanessa jumped in. "Honestly, it's better for everyone. This house is underutilized. We could modernize it, make it more functional." Functional. I looked around my living room, the hardwood floors Thomas installed himself, the bookshelf I assembled after he passed, the clock that ticks in a rhythm I know by heart. "Underutilized," I nodded once. "I see." They both seemed relieved that I wasn't shouting. Vanessa's shoulders relaxed slightly. Ryan exhaled. People mistake calm for compliance. "I'll freshen up," I said and walked back toward my bedroom. Vanessa's voice followed me. "Oh, actually, we've been using that room." "Of course you have." I paused in the doorway and turned. "Excuse me," she met my gaze steadily. It made more sense. "The master bedroom is larger." "Master," I smiled faintly, not warmly, just enough to register composure. "This house," I said evenly, "is in my name." Ryan swallowed. Vanessa tilted her head. "Yes, but," I raised one hand, not aggressively, just enough to pause the sentence. "I didn't argue," I said quietly. "I didn't shout, I simply walked inside my own home." Ryan looked uncomfortable now. He knew that tone. It was the one I used when school board meetings drifted into nonsense. Vanessa tried again. "We're family." "Family asks," I replied. The room fell silent. I stepped into my bedroom fully and closed the door behind me, not slammed. Closed. Inside, I examined everything carefully. Drawers opened. Closet rearranged. My documents box moved from the top shelf to the lower one. That caught my attention. I walked to the closet and opened the box. Deed. Insurance papers, utility accounts, all intact, untouched. Good. I sat on the edge of the bed, their duvet crinkling beneath me, and let my mind settle. I did not feel rage. I felt calculation. Thomas used to say, "Never respond while you're still gathering information." He was an engineer. He believed in foundations before decisions. So I gathered. I listened to their footsteps outside my door, their whispers. The soft hum of Vanessa's phone as she likely texted someone about the inconvenience of my return. They believed they had control because they occupied space. They forgot something critical. Occupancy is not ownership. I opened my nightstand drawer and removed my small leather planner. I flipped to the contact page and ran my finger down to a familiar name. Gregory Mills, estate attorney, precise, unshakable. I did not call him yet, not immediately. Strategic timing matters. Instead, I stood, walked back into the hallway, and looked at Ryan. "We'll have dinner at 6, I said calmly. "In the kitchen together." Vanessa blinked. "Dinner, yes." Ryan nodded quickly. "Okay, Mom." I looked at him a moment longer than necessary. "I hope you're both hungry." Then I walked toward the pantry. Inside, I began taking quiet inventory. What was mine? What had been moved? What had been used? They thought this story began when she opened the door and told me I couldn't come in. It didn't. It began the moment they assumed silence meant surrender. And by the time dinner ended that night, they would understand something they had completely underestimated. At exactly 6 o'clock, I placed 3 plates on the table. Not 4, not 2, 3. Details matter, Vanessa noticed first. "Oh," she said lightly, "we've been eating in the living room. It's more relaxed." "I prefer the table," I replied. Ryan hovered near the counter, unsure where to stand. He has always been like that when tension thickens, waiting for the emotional weather to settle before choosing a side. I served roasted chicken, rice, and green beans. Simple, intentional, controlled. Vanessa looked at the food and smiled politely. "We usually don't eat this heavy in the evening. We try to keep things lighter." "This is how I cook," I said calmly. "You're welcome to prepare your own meals tomorrow." Tomorrow. Ryan's eyes flickered upward at that word. We sat. The clock ticked on the wall, steady, deliberate. Thomas installed that clock the week after we moved in. He said a house should have a heartbeat. The rhythm filled the silence between us. Vanessa picked at her food. Ryan cleared his throat. "Mom," he began carefully, "we didn't mean to upset you." I'm not upset, I said, and that was true. Vanessa leaned back slightly. We just assumed it would be easier. You live alone. We thought you'd appreciate the company. Company. I didn't realize my solitude required correction, I replied. Ryan winced slightly. Vanessa smiled again, thin, polished. You know what I mean, she said. This house has potential, it just needs updating. We've already looked at a few contractors. Contractors, I set my fork down gently. You've looked at contractors? Yes, she said brightly. Open concept kitchen, maybe expand the master suite. It would increase the value significantly. Ryan nodded faintly as if to support her enthusiasm. Value, I folded my napkin once and placed it beside my plate. This house is not an investment property, I said. It is a residence. Vanessa tilted her head. Everything is an investment if you think long term. I looked at Ryan. Did you authorize this? He hesitated. We were just exploring ideas. Exploring. Another word people use when they've already crossed a boundary. I stood and walked to the cabinet drawer where I keep household files. Slowly, deliberately, I removed a slim binder and placed it on the table. Vanessa's eyes followed it. Ryan shifted in his seat. Inside the binder were property tax records, utility bills, insurance documents organized chronologically. I run this home the same way I ran a school district office, I said evenly. With documentation, Vanessa laughed softly. We're not auditing you, Evelyn. No, I replied, but I am clarifying something. I opened to the first page, the deed. Ryan looked uncomfortable now. Vanessa's smile thinned. This property, I continued calmly, is solely in my name. It has been since your father passed. Ryan swallowed. I know that, Mom. Do you? Silence. Vanessa crossed her arms. No one is trying to take anything from you. I didn't say you were, but I let the sentence hang in the air, because sometimes what isn't said is louder. I closed the binder. You're welcome to stay, I said carefully. But there will be clarity. Vanessa's eyebrows lifted. Clarity? Yes. I turned to Ryan. How long is your temporary situation? He rubbed his forehead. The lease fell through. We're negotiating, maybe 3 weeks. Maybe longer. Income? I asked. Vanessa stiffened. Excuse me, I'm speaking to my son. Ryan exhaled. My commissions have been down, the market shifted. And savings? He didn't answer immediately. Vanessa answered for him. We're restructuring? Restructuring is a softer word for unprepared. I nodded once. Then here is what will happen, I said quietly. You will contribute. Ryan looked startled. Contribute? To utilities, to groceries. To shared space? Vanessa let out a short breath of disbelief. Evelyn, we're in a rough spot. And I am in retirement, I replied evenly. I live on fixed planning. Not assumption? Ryan looked between us like a man watching 2 chess players move pieces he doesn't understand. We didn't budget for that, he said. Then you will start. Vanessa leaned forward. It's just a few weeks. It is my home. The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. The clock ticked again. Ryan stared at his plate. Vanessa stared at me. I'll transfer something tomorrow, Ryan said finally. Good, I replied. Vanessa stood abruptly. I think we need some air. She walked toward the living room without clearing her plate. Ryan lingered. Mom, she's just stressed. I'm sure she is. You don't have to make this harder. I looked at him for a long moment. I'm not making it harder, I'm making it defined. He didn't respond. When he left the kitchen, I began washing dishes slowly, methodically. Through the doorway, I heard Vanessa's voice, low but sharp. She's controlling Ryan. This is exactly what I warned you about. Ryan murmured something I couldn't catch. She can't treat us like tenants, Vanessa continued. Tenants? I dried my hands and stepped into the hallway. You are not tenants, I said calmly. They both froze. You are guests, I continued, and guests do not redesign bedrooms. Vanessa flushed slightly. Ryan looked mortified. I'll move our things out of your room, he said quickly. Tonight, I replied. Vanessa opened her mouth as if to argue, then stopped. She studied me carefully, measuring something. Perhaps she expected emotion, tears, threats. Instead, she got policy. I returned to the kitchen and picked up my phone. I did not call Gregory Mills yet, but I opened a new note and began typing dates. Observations, statements made, documentation, because people who overstep rarely realize when they've left evidence. Later that evening, I walked into my bedroom and found my comforter restored. Their duvet folded at the foot of the guest room bed instead. Small victory, but the air had shifted. Vanessa no longer looked irritated, she looked cautious. Ryan looked conflicted. Good. Before bed, I reviewed the utilities account on my laptop. Online access, passwords unchanged, ownership verified. Then I did something subtle. I updated every password, not dramatically, not confrontationally. Quietly, when you control the structure, you control the outcome. I closed my laptop and sat in the dim light of my bedside lamp. Thomas used to say that foundations don't crack loudly, they weaken quietly over time. But this house had strong foundations, and I had just begun reinforcing them, because dinner at 6 wasn't about food, it was about authority, and tomorrow morning I intended to take it one step further. The house was quiet at 6:15 a.m., that is my hour. Long before Ryan ever learned to drive, long before Vanessa learned to curate a room for photographs, this house understood my footsteps at dawn. I brewed coffee the way I always do, measured, deliberate, no waste. The smell settled into the kitchen like memory reclaiming territory. When I opened the refrigerator, I noticed something small. My glass water pitcher had been moved to the back shelf. In its place sat almond milk, protein drinks, and labeled meal prep containers. Territory doesn't always shift loudly. Sometimes it slides an inch at a time. I moved my pitcher back to the front, then I opened my laptop at the kitchen table and logged into the utility portal. Electricity, water, gas, internet, all under my name, all auto-drafted from my account, all still active, for now. At 7:02 a.m., Ryan walked in, hair uncombed, eyes tired. He paused when he saw me already seated. "Morning, Mom." "Good morning." He hesitated before opening the refrigerator as though unsure what was now permitted. "That was interesting. I'll transfer something today," he said quickly, almost defensively. "I expect you will." He poured himself coffee without asking which mug was available. Progress, I suppose. Vanessa entered at 7:18 a.m., dressed in coordinated athleisure, phone already in hand. She stopped short when she saw us both at the table. "Oh," she said lightly, "a family meeting?" "No," I replied. "A household?" She opened the pantry. It did not go unnoticed that she scanned the shelves differently this time. "Did you reorganize?" she asked casually. "Yes." She closed the pantry slowly. I had not locked anything. I had not removed anything. I had simply separated items by ownership and labeled shelves discreetly inside the door. Top shelf, Evelyn; middle shelf, shared; bottom shelf, Ryan and Vanessa. Not confrontational, just clear. Vanessa forced a smile. "That's efficient." "I find clarity prevents confusion." Ryan looked uncomfortable again. He hates visible lines. He prefers blur. Blur feels peaceful to him, but blur is how boundaries dissolve. Vanessa took a protein bar from the bottom shelf and shut the pantry with more force than necessary. "I have a call at 9, she said to Ryan, not to me. "We should talk about the contractor timeline after." Contractor timeline. I sipped my coffee. "At 9, I said evenly. "I will be on a call as well." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "With my attorney." The room shifted. Ryan froze mid-sip. Vanessa blinked once. "Attorney," Ryan repeated. "Yes, for what?" "For documentation review." Vanessa laughed lightly. "Evelyn, that seems dramatic." "Preparation is not drama." Ryan set his mug down. "Mom, you're not trying to do something extreme, right?" "Extreme?" I asked calmly. "Define that." He ran a hand through his hair. "Like evict us or something?" Vanessa's eyes flicked to him sharply. I held his gaze. "Ryan," I said quietly, "if I were going to remove you, you would not be guessing." Silence followed. Vanessa crossed her arms. "This feels hostile. Boundaries often do to those who dislike them." She stared at me, measuring, recalibrating, insecurity wrapped in elegance. That is Vanessa. She needs control to feel safe. She needs aesthetic superiority to feel stable. But she has never faced stillness like mine. At 9 o'clock sharp, I stepped into my bedroom and closed the door. I dialed Gregory Mills. He answered on the third ring. "Evelyn," his voice was steady as ever. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I need clarity," I said. He waited. He always waits. Gregory never fills silence. He understands that silence often reveals more than questions. "My son and his wife are occupying my residence," I continued, "without formal agreement." Duration? Indefinite according to them, temporary in language only. Have you granted tenancy? No. Have they contributed financially? Not yet. He paused briefly. Paper shuffling in the background. You understand, he said calmly, that prolonged occupancy without defined terms can complicate removal. I do. Then documentation must begin immediately. It has. I heard the faintest hint of approval in his tone. I suggest, he continued, a written occupancy agreement with specific time frame and financial contribution. If they refuse to sign, you initiate formal notice. And if they attempt modification of property, you document and restrict. Restrict. I want everything airtight, I said. It will be, Gregory replied. You are not the first mother who has needed clarity. I ended the call and sat still for a moment. Thomas's photograph sat on my dresser. You always said, I murmured softly, that steel beams don't argue, they hold. When I stepped back into the hallway, Vanessa was standing near the living room window. Everything okay? She asked sweetly. Yes, Ryan stood behind her. Mom, can we just keep this simple? I replied. He hesitated. We don't want legal tension. Then don't create it. Vanessa's jaw tightened slightly. You're treating us like strangers? No, I corrected gently. I am treating you like adults. That landed. Vanessa walked toward me slowly. We thought this would be temporary support. Not paperwork. Support requires mutual respect. She lowered her voice. Are you trying to push us out? I am trying to define your presence. Ryan looked between us again like a man watching a storm he doesn't know how to step into. What do you want from us? He asked. Clarity, contribution, timeline. Vanessa folded her arms again. And if we don't agree, I held her gaze, calm, unblinking. Then you will understand why I placed that call. No shouting. No threats, just truth. Ryan exhaled slowly. Okay, he said. Let's talk numbers. Good. We moved to the dining table, the same one Vanessa had tried to make more relaxed. I placed a blank sheet of paper in front of them. 30 days, I said. Fixed contribution to utilities and food, no structural changes, no contractors, no redecoration, no bedroom reassignment. Vanessa scoffed softly. You make it sound like a lease. It is. Ryan stared at the page. 30 days, yes. And after that, you leave. The air went very still. Vanessa's lips parted slightly. You've already decided? I have decided that my home will not become ambiguous. Ryan looked wounded now. You don't trust us. I don't trust assumption. Silence filled the room again. Finally, Vanessa leaned back in her chair. You know what this is, she said coolly. This is control. I smiled faintly. No, I replied, this is ownership. Ryan looked at the paper again. He picked up the pen. Vanessa's eyes snapped toward him. Ryan, he hesitated. There it was. The crossroads, comfort or courage, approval or accountability. He swallowed. And I realized something in that moment. This was not about space. It was about whether my son would ever learn to stand upright without leaning on someone else's will. He hovered with the pen above the paper. Vanessa waited, and I waited too, because sometimes the most powerful move is letting someone choose who they really are. Ryan's hand hovered over the paper longer than it should have. I did not rush him. Vanessa leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, watching him the way a person watches someone about to betray them. Not loudly, not dramatically, just with quiet pressure. Ryan, she said softly, almost kindly, we don't need to formalize this. We're family. Family, it is the most misused word in moments like this. Ryan looked at her, then at me, then at the blank line waiting for ink. I'm not asking you to sign away anything, I said calmly. I'm asking you to acknowledge where you are standing. In your house, Vanessa replied coolly. Yes. Silence again. The clock ticked. Ryan finally lowered the pen and signed his name. Not boldly, not confidently, but he signed. Vanessa's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She did not speak for a full 5 seconds. That is a long time for someone who fills silence with dominance. You're really doing this, she said quietly. I already did, I replied. She stood slowly, pushing her chair back with controlled force. Fine, she said. If that's the environment you want, that's what you'll get. Environment. She walked down the hallway without another word. Ryan remained seated, staring at his signature as if it had just rewritten something in him. Mom, yes, you didn't have to make it feel like this. Like what? Transactional. I folded the paper neatly. It became transactional when you moved into my bedroom. That silenced him. He nodded once, slowly. A small flicker of shame crossed his face. I'll transfer the first contribution today, he said quietly. I expect you will. He left the table and followed Vanessa down the hallway. A few minutes later, I heard the bedroom door close more firmly than necessary, not slammed, but deliberate. The house felt different now, not hostile. Defined, I returned to my room and placed the signed agreement inside my documentation binder. Then I made a photocopy and placed it in a separate folder labeled simply Occupancy. I did not feel victorious. I felt aligned. There is a difference. At noon, I received a notification on my phone. Transfer received. Ryan had sent the agreed amount. On time, without reminder, good, but money is the simplest part of accountability. The harder part is behavior. Around 2 o'clock, I walked into the living room and noticed something new. A measuring tape stretched across the far wall. Vanessa stood near the window, phone propped up, camera facing the room. What are you doing? I asked calmly. She did not jump, she did not look embarrassed. Content, she said casually, before and after potential. Potential for what? For transformation, this space could be beautiful. It already is, she smiled faintly. To you, I stepped closer and picked up the measuring tape, retracted it slowly. There will be no transformations, I said evenly. It's just ideas, she insisted. Inspiration. Inspiration does not require measurements. She held my gaze. You're afraid of change? No, I replied softly. I am selective about it. Ryan appeared from the hallway. He sensed tension like weather pressure. What's going on? Your wife is measuring structural walls. Vanessa exhaled sharply. Oh my God, Ryan, I'm not knocking anything down. Not yet, I said, her eyes flashed. You think I'm trying to take over. I think you're accustomed to entering spaces and reshaping them. That's called improvement. It is called assumption. Ryan rubbed his temples. Can we just breathe for a second? I turned to him calmly. Your signature means something, Ryan. I know, then enforce it. He hesitated. Vanessa watched him again, that quiet pressure returning. Vanessa, he said carefully, maybe let's hold off on redesign plans. She stared at him as if he had just betrayed something sacred. So now you're siding? I'm respecting the agreement. The word agreement sounded foreign in his mouth. But he said it. Vanessa's shoulders stiffened. You've changed, she said to him quietly. No, I replied before he could answer. He hasn't, he's deciding. That was the first moment I saw something flicker in Ryan's eyes, not fear. Not avoidance, recognition. Vanessa picked up her phone and walked past us. Fine, she muttered. I won't touch your precious walls. The hallway door closed again. Ryan stood there awkwardly. She feels like you're pushing her out. I am pushing behavior out. She thinks you don't like her. I don't trust her entitlement. He exhaled slowly. Mom, she's just used to being in control. So am I. That landed. He looked at me differently then. Perhaps for the first time since he was a teenager, he saw not a mother to lean on, but a woman who stood on her own structure. That evening, I received an email notification. Change request submitted, internet account user access modification. I opened it immediately. Vanessa had attempted to add her name as an authorized account manager. Interesting. She had moved faster than I expected. I declined the request. Then I forwarded the email to Gregory Mills with a single line, documentation. His reply came 20 minutes later. Continue recording, pattern forming, pattern forming. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. Vanessa wasn't loud. She wasn't explosive. She was incremental. But so was I. Later that night, as I passed their bedroom door, I heard raised whispers. She's humiliating us, Vanessa said. She's setting rules, Ryan replied. It's the same thing. No, it's not. Silence followed. I returned to my room and sat at my vanity. Thomas's photograph reflected beside me in the mirror. You always said, I murmured softly, that strength doesn't need volume. This was not about eviction, not yet. This was about something far more important. Would my son continue to stand upright when pressure leaned in? Or would he fold the moment it became uncomfortable? The answer would not reveal itself in arguments. It would reveal itself in the next move Vanessa tried to make. And I had a feeling she was not finished testing the limits of a house she did not own. It did not explode. That would have been easier. Instead, it shifted. Quietly, gradually, like pressure building beneath a surface that still looks calm from the outside. 3 days passed after Ryan signed the agreement. He transferred the funds again on schedule. He began washing his own dishes. He even corrected Vanessa once when she referred to the guest room as our space. Small corrections, but Vanessa did not retreat. She recalibrated. On the fourth morning, I walked into the living room and noticed something missing. Thomas's drafting table. It had been folded and moved to the corner behind the bookshelf. In its place sat a narrow console table with a decorative bowl and 2 minimalist candles. I stood there for a long moment. The drafting table was not decorative. It was scarred, ink-stained, practical. Thomas had used it for 30 years. After he passed, I kept it there not as a shrine, but as continuity. Ryan walked in, noticed my stillness. "What's wrong?" I pointed. He followed my gaze, his expression tightened. "Vanessa thought the room needed to feel lighter," he said carefully. "Did you move it?" "No." "Did you approve it?" He hesitated. That hesitation was louder than any answer. "I didn't think it mattered," he said quietly. I walked to the corner and placed my hand on the drafting table's edge. The wood was cool beneath my fingers. "It matters," I said. Vanessa entered seconds later, dressed impeccably as always, expression neutral. "Oh," she said lightly, "you saw that. It opens the room up, don't you think?" "It removes history," I replied calmly. "It removes clutter. It removes my husband." That stopped her for just a second, then she recovered. "Evelyn, it's just furniture." "No," I said softly, "it is foundation." Ryan stepped between us, not physically but emotionally. "Mom, she didn't mean it like that." "I know exactly what she meant." Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly. "You think everything is an attack? I think nothing in this house is neutral." The air thickened. Vanessa turned toward Ryan. "You see, this is what I was telling you. She makes everything symbolic." Ryan looked torn. He always looks torn when forced to choose perspective. I moved the drafting table back into place myself. Slowly, deliberately, neither of them helped. When it was restored to its original position, I stepped back. "This is not about aesthetic preference," I said evenly. "It is about authority." Vanessa crossed her arms. "We signed your paper." "Yes," I replied. "And the paper includes no structural or interior modification." "It's not structural. It is not yours." Silence. Ryan finally spoke. "Vanessa, just leave it." She stared at him. "You're afraid of her," she said quietly. "No," he replied, "I'm respecting her." That sentence changed something. Vanessa looked at him differently then, not as a partner, but as a variable she had miscalculated. She said nothing more. She walked away. But escalation does not always present as argument. Sometimes it arrives as inconvenience. That afternoon, I went to adjust the thermostat. It had been reprogrammed. The temperature lowered by 6 degrees, energy saving schedule disabled, manual override engaged. I reset it. An hour later, it was lowered again. Interesting. I walked to the guest room. Vanessa sat cross-legged on the bed, laptop open. "Did you adjust the thermostat?" I asked. "It was freezing," she replied without looking up. "It was not. I run cold. You can use a blanket." She closed her laptop slowly and looked at me. "You don't have to monitor everything." "I don't monitor, I manage." "It's suffocating." "Ownership often is to those who expect access without responsibility." Her jaw tightened. "You think I'm trying to take something from you? I think you are testing how much you can move without consequence." That struck closer than she expected. She stood. "I married your son." "I'm not an intruder." "In my marriage," I replied evenly, "we built before we claimed." Ryan's voice sounded from the hallway. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Vanessa said quickly. "Your mother thinks I'm adjusting the temperature to overthrow her." I didn't respond to the sarcasm. I turned to Ryan. "The thermostat will remain on its original schedule." He nodded. "Okay." Vanessa laughed once, sharp, restrained. "This is absurd." "No," I replied. "It is structured." That night I updated the thermostat password. Then I logged into the home insurance portal. No changes. Good. Then I opened my property tax account, still solely in my name. Good. Then I reviewed my will. It had been 8 years since Thomas passed, 8 years since I last revised it. At the time, I left everything equally to Ryan. It felt simple, natural, but life reveals character over time. And character informs legacy. The next morning, I called Gregory Mills again. I need to review my estate distribution, I said. No emergency, he asked. No. Clarification? Come by Thursday? I hung up and sat still for a long moment. This was not revenge. This was alignment. Later that afternoon, I returned home from the market and noticed something else. A framed print hung above the fireplace. Minimalist typography, beige background. New beginnings. Thomas's landscape painting, the one he bought during our first trip west, was gone. I found it leaning against the hallway wall. Face turned inward, I picked it up carefully. The glass was intact. Ryan stood nearby, watching me. She said it didn't match the palette, he offered weakly. Did you agree? I asked. He hesitated, then shook his head. No, did you say that? Another pause. No. I replaced the painting above the fireplace, removed the beige print, handed it to him. This goes in the guest room, I said calmly. Vanessa appeared in the doorway again. You're making this unbearable, she said quietly. No, I replied. I am making it accurate. She stared at me for a long time, then she said something that revealed more than she intended. You can't hold this house forever. I tilted my head slightly. Watch me. That was the first time her composure cracked, because she had not been thinking about 30 days. She had been thinking long-term about eventual ownership, about inheritance, about timeline, and I had just reminded her of something critical. Time is not a weakness. It is leverage. That evening, Ryan knocked gently on my bedroom door. Mom, yes, I need to ask you something. Go on, he swallowed. If something happened to you, this house would eventually be mine, right? There it was. The unspoken current finally surfaced. I looked at him steadily. That depends, I said softly. On what? On who you are when that time comes. He looked confused, hurt. I'm still your son. Yes, I replied. But you are also a man making choices. Silence lingered between us. Are you changing your will? He asked quietly. I did not answer immediately. Instead, I asked him a question. Ryan, if this house were already in your name, would I still be sitting at the head of this table? He didn't respond. And in that silence, I heard the answer. He walked away slowly. I closed my door and sat on the edge of my bed. Vanessa thought this was about Dacre. Ryan thought this was about temporary shelter. But the real shift had already begun. Because the moment inheritance becomes assumed, legacy begins to change. The morning I went to see Gregory Mills, I dressed the way I used to for board evaluations. Navy blazer, structured slacks, hair pinned neatly. Not because I needed to impress anyone, but because when you are about to adjust the direction of your legacy, you should look like someone who understands the weight of it. Ryan noticed as I picked up my handbag. Where are you going? He asked cautiously. I told you, I replied. Documentation review. He hesitated. Is this about what I asked you? It is about everything I've observed. Vanessa stood in the kitchen doorway, pretending not to listen. She was always pretending not to listen. Evelyn, she said lightly, we didn't mean to make you question anything long-term. You didn't make me question, I replied calmly. You revealed. Her expression tightened. I left before either of them could shape the moment into something softer than it was. Gregory's office smelled faintly of leather and old paper. He stood when I entered, as he always does. A man who understands respect without performance. Evelyn, he said, gesturing for me to sit. What are we restructuring? My will, I replied. He nodded once. No surprise, no judgment, just precision. Current structure leaves primary residence and financial assets solely to your son, he said, reviewing his file. Yes, and you wish to modify? I wish to remove assumption from the equation. His eyes flicked upward briefly. He understood immediately. Behavioral concerns, pattern recognition. He folded his hands on the desk. Go on, I explained calmly, not emotionally, not dramatically, just facts. Occupancy without permission, gradual modification, attempted account access, casual reference to eventual ownership. Gregory listened without interruption. When I finished, he said quietly, You're not reacting, you're responding. Yes, then we'll structure accordingly. He pulled a clean draft form from his drawer. Option 1, he said. You transfer residence into a living trust controlled solely by you with conditional inheritance terms. Define conditional. Release upon demonstrated financial independence and stable housing outside this property. No cohabitation with you at time of transfer. I considered that. And option 2, you place the property in trust indefinitely, liquidated upon your passing, proceeds distributed in percentages. I looked at him steadily. And if I wanted neither? He raised an eyebrow slightly. There is always option 3, which is, you designate the property to a foundation, institution, or other beneficiary entirely. The room was quiet. 8 years ago, that thought would have felt unthinkable. Now it felt rational. I am not punishing my son, I said carefully. I know, Gregory replied. You are protecting yourself. There is a difference. After an hour of revisions, clarifications, and legal precision, I signed a preliminary adjustment. The house would move into a revocable living trust under my sole authority. Ryan would no longer inherit it automatically. Instead, he would inherit under conditions. Accountability, stability, respectful conduct, not as punishment, as alignment. When I stood to leave, Gregory handed me a sealed copy. You don't need to announce this, he said. I don't intend to. He gave me a long look. Be prepared for reaction if it's discovered. It won't be discovered, I replied. He smiled faintly. You always were meticulous. I returned home at 3:40 p.m. The house felt quieter than usual, too quiet. Ryan sat at the dining table, laptop open. Vanessa stood near the hallway, arms folded. We need to talk, she said before I had even set down my bag. Interesting. About, the bank called, she said evenly. My pulse did not change. And they said there was a trust review request tied to this address. Not discovered. Triggered, I had updated the property structure. The mortgage-free home required formal notification to linked accounts. Vanessa must have tried something again. Ryan looked uneasy. Mom, are you moving the house into a trust? I removed my blazer calmly, placed it on the hook. Yes, silence. Vanessa's voice sharpened. Without telling us? Why would I? Ryan stood. Because it affects me. It affects you eventually, I corrected gently. Not presently. Vanessa laughed softly. So that's it. You don't trust us? I trust patterns. Ryan looked hurt. You're cutting me out. No, I replied. I am redefining access. He ran a hand over his face. This feels extreme. Does it? Yes. More extreme than moving into my bedroom. Silence again. Vanessa stepped forward. You're weaponizing legality. I am utilizing legality. There's a difference. Not to someone who expected inheritance without examination. Her eyes flashed. So that's what this is about. You think I married him for this house? I think you think long-term, I replied calmly. Ryan looked between us again. Mom, you could have just talked to me. I did. You didn't say you'd change the will. I didn't need to threaten it. I needed to protect it. The air was thick now, not loud, just charged. Vanessa's voice dropped lower. You're trying to scare us. No, I replied. I'm trying to teach you something. Ryan's jaw tightened slightly. Teach me what? That ownership is not inherited, it is demonstrated. That sentence landed heavier than the rest. He sat back down slowly. Vanessa shook her head. You're unbelievable. I am consistent. She stepped closer. What if we just leave? That is your right. And what if he never comes back? I looked at Ryan. That will also be his choice. The room fell silent. For the first time since they arrived, Vanessa looked uncertain, not angry, not superior. Uncertain because this was no longer about Dacre. It was about leverage she did not have. Ryan spoke again, quieter this time. What are the conditions? Financial independence, I said, separate residence. Respectful conduct. And if I meet them, then you inherit what I choose to leave. And if I don't, then you inherit something else. Vanessa's composure cracked slightly. This is manipulation. No, I said softly. This is maturity. Thomas used to tell Ryan when he was a boy, you don't get the keys to the truck because you want them. You get them because you've shown you can drive. This was no different. Ryan stared at the table for a long time. Vanessa looked at him, searching for outrage, but something in his posture had changed. Not fully, not dramatically, but slightly, and sometimes slight shifts alter entire foundations. He finally looked up at me. I'll start looking for a place, he said quietly. Vanessa turned toward him sharply. What? I'll start looking. Her eyes widened. Because she's threatening you? No, he replied slowly, because she's right. The room went still. For the first time since she walked into my doorway and questioned my presence, Vanessa did not have the stronger position. She had miscalculated something critical. She thought this was a power struggle. It wasn't. It was a demonstration. And the demonstration had just begun to work. Because when inheritance becomes conditional, character becomes visible. Ryan did not speak for the rest of that evening. Vanessa did, not loudly, not screaming. She was never theatrical. She was persuasive. "You're letting her intimidate you," she said from the guest room, her voice low but sharp enough to carry through the hallway. "She's rewriting everything because she can." Ryan's reply was quieter. "It's her house. It's your future." Silence followed. I did not stand outside their door. I did not need to. Houses carry sound in familiar ways. I have lived within these walls long enough to know when a conversation shifts tone. Vanessa was no longer irritated. She was anxious. Because conditional inheritance is different than assumed inheritance. An assumption had been her foundation. The next morning, Ryan woke earlier than usual. 6:40 a.m. I was already in the kitchen. He sat down across from me without pouring coffee. "I started looking," he said quietly. "At apartments, yes, and they're expensive. Yes." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "I guess I never realized how expensive independence is." "It always has been," I replied. He looked down at his hands. "I thought eventually this would just be mine." I waited. "And I guess I lived like that was already true." "Yes," I said softly. He nodded slowly, no defensiveness, no argument, just recognition. Vanessa entered a few minutes later, already dressed, already composed. "Are we doing this again?" she asked coolly. "Morning accountability sessions?" "No," Ryan said before I could answer. "We're talking." She paused. That interruption unsettled her. "We're fine," she insisted. "We're not fine," he replied. "We moved in without asking. You said she wouldn't mind." "I assumed she wouldn't." Vanessa crossed her arms. "And she overreacted?" Ryan shook his head slightly. "No," she responded. There it was again, that word, responded. Vanessa looked at him like he had stepped out of formation. "You're choosing her," she said quietly. "I'm choosing reality?" I did not smile. I did not react. I simply watched, because this was never about me choosing sides. It was about whether my son would ever stand without leaning. Vanessa stepped closer to him. "So what now? We scramble to rent something we can't afford just to prove a point?" "It's not about proving a point," he said, his voice steadier than I'd heard in days. "It's about not expecting something that isn't ours." She stared at him for a long moment. "You've changed," she said again. "No," he replied quietly. "I've been corrected." That was the first time I saw something soften in him that had been rigid for years, not defiance, accountability. Vanessa exhaled sharply and turned away. "Fine," she said. "Let's say we move out, then what? She still doesn't trust us." Ryan looked at me. "I don't need her to trust us," he said. "I need her to respect us." "And how do you earn that?" I asked calmly. "By not taking what isn't given." Silence filled the room again. Vanessa looked between us, calculating. She understood something was shifting and she did not like not controlling it. "You think moving out fixes this?" she asked him. "No," he replied. "It starts fixing me." That sentence changed everything. Vanessa didn't argue this time. She didn't mock. She didn't laugh. She walked back down the hallway and closed the door, but not with force, just distance. Later that afternoon, Ryan came to my room and knocked gently. "Yes." He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "I need to say something," he began. "Go on." "I've been waiting," he said carefully. "Waiting for you to hand me something I didn't build." I remained silent. And when Vanessa started talking about renovations, about value, about how this would eventually be ours, I didn't stop her. "No," I said softly. "I think part of me believed that once you were gone," he couldn't finish the sentence. "I'm not gone," I replied. "I know," he swallowed. "And I treated you like you already were." That was the first true apology, not the polite kind. Not the defensive kind, the aware kind. "I didn't raise you to wait for someone else's work," I said. "I know. You watched your father build everything he had. I know. You saw him fix, plan, measure, sacrifice. I know. Then why did you think ownership was inheritance?" He looked at the floor. "Because it was easier?" There it was. The truth is rarely dramatic. It is usually simple. He looked back up at me. "We found a small place, 2 bedrooms, not ideal, but manageable. When If the application goes through next week, I nodded once. Vanessa did not come to dinner that night. She said she wasn't hungry. Ryan ate quietly. I don't think she expected this, he said. No, I replied. She expected resistance or surrender, not structure. He gave a small nod. Mom, if I do this right, if I build something myself, does that change things? Yes, I said simply. How? It changes you. He stared at his plate for a long moment. And the house, he asked quietly. The house will go where it belongs. And where is that? With someone who understands it. He nodded slowly. That night I heard them packing. Not angrily, not dramatically, just folding clothes, zipping bags, quiet movement. Vanessa did not say goodbye when she went to bed, but she did not move anything else either. No measuring tapes. No palette changes, no thermostat adjustments. The next morning, Ryan stood in the living room with a small stack of boxes near the door. Vanessa stood beside him, composed but distant. We'll be out by Friday, he said. I know, I replied. He hesitated. Thank you for not yelling. I don't yell, I said calmly. Vanessa looked at me for a long moment. You win, she said quietly. I shook my head. This was never a competition? She studied me as if trying to understand how someone could hold ground without aggression. Then she nodded once, barely perceptible. They walked toward the door. Ryan paused before stepping out. Mom, yes, I'll build something on my own. I hope you do. The door closed behind them. The house felt still again, not empty, still. I walked into the living room and placed my hand on Thomas's drafting table. The wood felt steady beneath my palm. He used to say that the strength of a structure isn't tested when everything is quiet. It's tested when someone leans against it expecting it to give. This house did not give, and neither did I. But what mattered most wasn't that they were leaving. It was that my son had finally seen the line between inheritance and entitlement. And once you see that line, you can never pretend it isn't there. They left on a Friday afternoon. Not in a rush, not in chaos, not with slammed doors or final insults, just boxes, a rented van, quiet footsteps. Ryan carried the last box down the driveway himself. Vanessa stood beside the passenger door, arms folded, not defensive this time, just closed. I watched from the doorway not because I needed to supervise, but because endings deserve witnesses. When Ryan returned the final time, he didn't avoid my eyes. I transferred the last utility contribution, he said, and I updated my mailing address. Good, I replied. He looked around the living room, the drafting table, the clock, the painting above the fireplace. I didn't see it before, he said quietly. See what? That this wasn't just a house. No, I said softly. It never was. Vanessa approached then. Her posture was different, still composed, still careful, but stripped of certainty. I underestimated you, she said. Yes, I replied evenly. A faint smile touched her lips, not mocking this time. Just honest, I thought you'd either explode or give in. I don't do either, she nodded slowly. Goodbye, Evelyn. Goodbye, Vanessa. Ryan stepped closer. For a moment, he looked like the boy who used to wait at the bottom of the stairs for his father to come home. I'll call you, he said. When you have something to say, I replied gently. He nodded, not wounded, not defensive, just aware. They drove away without looking back. And I did not wave, not out of coldness, but because I do not dramatize transitions. When the van disappeared at the end of the street, I closed the door and stood in the quiet. Real quiet, not tense, not occupied, not negotiated. Earned. I walked through each room slowly. The guest room was empty again, the living room untouched, the thermostat steady, the pantry aligned. I removed the occupancy folder from my binder and slid it into the back section marked completed. Then I sat at the dining table, the same table where that first paper had been signed. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt settled. Later that week, I returned to Gregory Mill's office. It's done, I told him. They moved out? Yes, he nodded once. And your son? He's learning. Gregory folded his hands. Do you wish to finalize the trust terms? I considered that. No, I said after a moment. Not yet. He studied me carefully. Conditional remains? Yes, because growth should have room to prove itself. He gave a faint, approving nod. Very well, the structure remains in your control. That was the point, not punishment, control. Weeks passed. Ryan called once. He didn't ask about the house. He didn't mention inheritance. He told me about overtime shifts, about budgeting, about how small their new kitchen felt compared to mine. I didn't realize how much work it takes, he admitted. It always did, I replied. There was no resentment in his voice, no entitlement, just effort. Vanessa did not speak during that call, but I could hear her in the background. Not complaining, just present. That mattered. One afternoon, I sat at Thomas's drafting table with a cup of tea and ran my hand along the old wood. He used to say that buildings fail when load-bearing beams are compromised. But they also fail when weight is misplaced. I had carried weight that was not mine to carry, expectations, assumptions, future plans that belonged to someone else's ambition. And I had set them down, not with anger, with clarity. At 71, I understand something I did not at 40. Love without boundaries becomes obligation. Obligation without respect becomes resentment. And resentment, if left uncorrected, becomes erosion. I chose correction. A month later, Ryan stopped by alone. No announcement, just a knock. When I opened the door, he looked different, tired but steadier. I fixed the sink myself, he said, almost shyly. In your new place? Yes, that's good. He stepped inside, but he did not walk past the entryway until I gestured for him to. Permission. It was subtle, but it was there. We sat at the table. I've been thinking, he said carefully. About what you asked me. If this house were already mine, would you still be sitting at the head of it? And I don't think you would. I didn't answer. He continued. And that bothers me. Why? Because that means I would have taken something from you before you were finished with it. There it was. Understanding, he looked around the room again, not evaluating, not measuring, just seeing. I don't want it like that, he said. Then don't build your life like that, I replied. He nodded slowly. I'm not asking about the will, he added quickly. I'm not ready for that conversation. Good, he smiled faintly. I just wanted to sit here and know I'm not waiting anymore. That was the moment I understood something deeper than victory. This was not about protecting a house. It was about protecting a standard. After he left, I walked to the fireplace and adjusted Thomas's painting slightly. The sun hit the frame at just the right angle. I stood back and looked at the room. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had, because the difference was no longer in furniture, it was in understanding. Vanessa once told me I couldn't walk into my own house. She opened the door and questioned my presence. I didn't argue, I didn't shout. I set my bag down, and I walked inside. What they never saw coming wasn't eviction. It wasn't paperwork. It wasn't even the trust. It was this: I was never fighting for space. I was defending dignity. And dignity doesn't require volume, it requires certainty. This house stayed, so did I.